Hello, I'm Kaylea Poirier, and today I'm going to be talking about vegetables lowering cancer risk. My main question here was, do vegetables lower the risk of developing cancer? So you might be asking yourself, why cancer? It's kind of a common fact that vegetables in general have a lot of health benefits for humans. So why would I choose a disease that even chemically created cures do not 100% cure? And the reason is that cancer is the second leading cause of death in America, making it a pretty relevant disease that I think a lot of us already have a lot of familiarity with. According to the CDC, cancer amounts for 605,213 deaths in America. In order to fully dive into this concept, we have to understand two key terms. The first one is cancer. Cancer is a cellular mutation that causes the cell to divide uncontrollably. This occurs due to a failure in DNA replication. The second term that we have to be familiar with is vegetables. Vegetables are plants that are used as food and contain high amounts of antioxidants and phytochemicals. So now that we've learned these two terms, you might be asking yourself, all right, but how do they connect? The way they connect is that your diet influences your cancer risk. According to the NIH, 30 to 35% of cancer deaths can be linked back to the factor of diet. And although diet ranges from person to person, a balanced diet, at least according to the US Department of Agriculture, which distributes the photos seen in the middle of the screen, a meal is made up of more than 25% of vegetables, making it a pretty significant portion on your plate. So, if your diet includes vegetables and a diet influences your cancer risk, both are connected in a way. So, in order to fully dive into my hypothesis and my question, I had to look at three different experiments to see what they could prove to me. So, the first experiment I looked at was a case control study. The goal of this study was to figure out if high intakes of vegetables and fruit decreased the risk of cancer. In order to do this, the case group had individuals who had already had confirmed cancers. The control group had individuals with no history of cancer. Both of these groups were interviewed about their diet, and for those in the case group who already had cancer, they were interviewed about their diet before being diagnosed with cancer. Both of these interview answers were compared, and in conclusion, it was found that a high intake of vegetables lowered the risk of common epithelial cancers, showing that vegetables in your diet do have a significant impact on how likely you are to develop certain cancers. The second experiment I looked at went a little bit more in depth. This type of study was an animal study, and the goal was to figure out if consuming vegetables lowered the risk of colon cancer at the post-initiation stage. For context, the post-initiation stage is the first stage in cancer development. In order to do this, they injected male rats with 1,2-dimethylhydrazine, which is a cancerogen found in colon cancer, and they did this once a week for 2 weeks. After the doses were done, rats were randomly assigned to either a basal diet, it's mainly consisting of like grains and wheat, an apocaceous vegetable diet, which mainly consists of those greens you're familiar with, or a cruciferous vegetable diet, which is some of those colorful vegetables that you may see. And they were assigned to these diets for 10 weeks. In conclusion, in both the apocaceous and cruciferous vegetable diets, aberrant cryptic foci was reduced. And aberrant cryptic foci, if you do not know, are these lesions that are found within the colon when you have colon cancer. And there was a reduction in them, showing that this high consumption of vegetables, even though the rats already had a cancerogen in them, did reduce its effects on the rats. The third experiment goes even more in depth as we look at a cell study. The goal of this experiment was to identify the effects of phytochemicals with anti-CSCs or cancer stem cells in order to reduce development of colorectal cancer. So this focused specifically on phytochemicals, which if you remember from the beginning when we were talking about two different terms we need to understand, you'll remember that vegetables have a high amount of phytochemicals within them. So to further dive into this, The method they'd use would be observing how the biological properties of CSCs and CRC were affected by phytochemicals through the review of its impact on different CSC growth patterns. In conclusion, they found that phytochemicals can be useful in targeted therapies for CSCs and CRCs, which, by the way, CRC is a short way to say colorectal cancer. So phytochemicals could be very beneficial to further future cancer research, as it is shown that they reduce cancer stem cells even if a cell is already has cancer. It can reduce its impact on the body. So in conclusion, this entire research I was doing was mainly to explore the idea that of prevention for cancer before it even begins to form. Do vegetables actually have an impact on this disease? And the answer is that they do. So diets high in vegetable consumption help lower the risk of different cancers. We figured that out through the first experiment after the interviews. The second experiment showed us that the male rats, even though they had a cancer gene in their body, their high consumption of vegetables in their diets reduced the cancer gene's impact. And that third experiment showed us that the impact of vegetables against cancer can probably be dedicated partially to phytochemicals, which are a high component in vegetables. So even though vegetables, at least in the American diet, are not incredibly popular in terms of consumption, if you do have access to these foods, I would highly recommend digesting more of it into your diet. It already has incredible health benefits for us, but apparently it can also reduce our chances of developing this life-threatening disease. These are my sources on the last slide, and that is how I got my research. Thank you, and goodbye.